Hello and welcome back to the Pondering Papaya podcast. My name's Sam Cooper, I'm your usual host, but today I've got something a little bit different for you. I'm joined by one of the men who was crucial in making McLaren one of the best teams on the grid in terms of pit stops. Sergio Stelitano worked at McLaren for over a decade, and one of his main roles was making the pit stop crew as best they can be. Sergio was kind enough to agree to have a chat with me about everything that goes into a pit stop and why he thinks that 1.8 world record held by McLaren can be beaten. So joining me now, as promised, is Sergio. First of all, Sergio, I just said off air, but huge thanks to you for coming on today, giving us your time. Thanks for being here.
No worries at all.
How you doing? So you all good?
Yeah, all good.
Yeah, all excited for F1 testing. I mean, we're a few days away now from cars on track again after a long winter.
Yeah, it seems almost like it's come around a bit quicker than normal. To be fair, like it's a very short off season this year before everything's getting back to it. So yeah, it should be interesting to see how everything goes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So if we go back to sort of your career, if you can take you back to the early days before you were involved in McLaren, before you were involved in F1, sort of what was your upbringing, what was your background to eventually get onto a role like you were in?
So I kind of took a bit of a random way into F1. So I at university I was studying music production back when I was 17, 18, and I'd sort of fallen out of love with it, dropped out of uni, went on to a personal training course instead to become a personal trainer, and was working in the local gym when one of the guys I was working with said, "Oh look, there's a slot opened up at McLaren up the road." Mm-hmm. Lived locally in the area, and didn't really think too much of it to start with. It was like for 12 hours working in the gym. I thought, okay, cool. Well, I'll put my name in the hat, see what happens. And got to the factory and was blown away by it. I thought, right, I need to work here. This is me now. I have to get this. And sure enough, managed to get myself the job. As I said, started off sort of 12 hours a week, part time. Was wasn't quite sure what the trajectory was going to be like there. Human performance at that time. This is going back 12 years ago now when I first started there. Human performance was really only focused on the drivers, and nothing was happening with the race team, but properly happening with the race team. Mm-hmm. And and then sort of progressed through once I got there, and kind of carved my own career really within the team to then be working trackside with the team, specifically the pit crew, and all the other opportunities that have sort of come out from that as well. So that's kind of a condensed version of the route I sort of took to get into F1 and up to F1. So
yeah, definitely. I've spoken to a few people now who've worked at McLaren. They spoke of similar to you when you walk into the MTC, and it's sort of mind blowing. Or was it like the first time you mentioned it briefly, but sort of just stepping into that historic place?
It's weird because at first you don't really know what you're walking into, right? So it's quite and through working there, you kind of realise it's very, very deliberate. So when you walk in through the park up, you go down these little rotundas at sort of various intervals along the building, and you're just met with this long white corridor, right? So everyone says the same thing. It kind of looks like a Bond villain's lair. It's just very, very white, very sterile looking, and you kind of so you walk down this really long corridor, you get to a lift, and it takes you up from like a subfloor up to the sort of the reception areas, which are up on +1. But you're sort of met with this amazing view. When you come up through the lift, it's a glass lift, and as you come up sort of past ground level, you're just met with Horsell Common, which is this amazing, beautiful countryside behind you. And you're met with the boulevard. So you've got all these old school F1 cars just sat around everywhere. And it's immediately that wow factor. And it's weird. When you've been working there a while, and when you speak to people that have worked there a while, they're all they'll say the same thing. You just sort of get used to it and become a bit tone deaf to it. And then you invite somebody in as like a guest if you're having a business meeting or something, and they're blown away by it, and you're suddenly like, oh my God, this is actually really cool. And you sort of catch yourself a little bit. But yeah, it's a very, very special building. When you walk in there for the first time, but even after years, you walk in there and you're like, this is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm lucky to win a few times exactly that. Like, I don't think that would ever wear off on me. If we go back to your job, sort of, you mentioned a bit there, performance league. Like, could you just explain a bit what that actually involves? Because obviously, like you said, I think nowadays we're much more used to these terms, but even still, we perhaps don't know what it means. So, like you said, when you first started, what sort of stuff were you doing and who were you working with, kind of thing?
Yeah. So way back in the day, when I very, very first started, I was very much kind of the extra pair of hands for the rest of the team that were working in the human performance. So at the time, we were working on programs like the Young Driver program, which is actually where I first met Lando and Nick DeFries and Kevin Magnussen, stuff like Van Dorn, like all these and Oliver Turvey, like met all these cool young drivers who were relatively unknown. You know, I didn't come from a motorsport background myself, so I didn't really know who was who, which was actually quite nice. Just like, okay, these are cool guys, you know, get on with them. And then through working on those programs, kind of then progressed through to working with the race team, where I spent the bulk of my career working. So working specifically with the guys and girls on the traveling race team. So all the mechanics, the back of house staff, the logistics, all those kinds of people. And that's really where I kind of found my sort of niche, as it were. Like found that's the group I like to work with. And that progressed through various roles to the point where I got to team trainer, where I was traveling full time with the team, going all the races, and living the rock and roll lifestyle whilst on the road. And then my last role before leaving was working specifically with the pit crew, which I'd done at various points throughout my career there, but very, very specifically looking at the performance around the pit crew. So looking at everything from how they perform a pit stop, so the movements that were involved, looking at the data analysis of the pit stop, so like looking at timings, looking at video analysis, all this kind of stuff, to really build a bigger picture and bringing in my knowledge of human performance and what we would do in other elite sports, and bringing in that kind of that mindset and that process to the pit stop to make it what it is now, which is just something pretty awesome, to be fair.
Yeah, you're right. You bring up the pit stops, and then obviously it's probably McLaren and Red Bull that's sort of known as the leaders in the pit stop area. Of course, McLaren have got the world record as it stands. Sort of, you were there as McLaren got ridiculously good at pit stops. Sort of like, can you just talk about how you helped that? Like you said, you worked in performance lake, and I know you mentioned a bit about working on each individual area, but like, how much work does it take to get like 20 odd people to that level?
It's hours and hours and hours and hours of work, and there's equal measures as a coach. Like, it's equal measures of the inputs you're having, you know, being very specific with what you're trying to get you guys and girls to do, but also the determination and the willpower of the guys and girls that are doing it. You know, it's all very well and good having, you know, all the best kit, all the best technique, but if you haven't got somebody on the other end of it who wants to actually be there and do it and perform, you're never going to get the best out of people. And yeah, like a big thing we kind of worked on was this. Really, it's just perfecting. We're not doing anything different to anybody else. It's just doing it better. It's doing the little things more consistently, like deliberate practice, making sure that when you're doing a repetition, like, you're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. There has to be an outcome from it, you know, and that's how you really gain performance. In the same way, you know, you don't just send the car out on track to just for Lando or Oscar to just have a good time. They're there for a very specific reason. When you're doing a run plan, okay, what's the objective of that run plan? You've got three time laps. Okay, what are we trying to get from that? Or what are we trying to work on going into corner 2, for example? Like, these things we can apply from F1 to the pit stop, and that's something we do in other sports as well. You know, you're not just practicing the set piece in football. You're very, very deliberately trying to perfect it and understand, okay, well, in all these different scenarios, this is how we're going to solve that problem. And yeah, sort of a bit of a longer answer, but kind of where it really comes down to, I think.
And where did that push to come really good pit stops come from? Was it something like Zach Brown, for example? Did he sort of really emphasize maybe Andrea Stella in his role?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Andrea is just, I was very fortunate to have a very good relationship with Andrea. And very much there was a kind of an overarching theme of like, right, well, in very much the same way we do that Gareth Southgate's done with the England football team. It's like it's about consistency. Peak performance comes from consistently performing to a high standard. You don't just bang out a 1.8 second stop as a fluke. You create that environment by consistently hitting faster, like hitting performance. And so having very clear boundaries of, okay, well, this is what we class as good. This is what we class as not good. Let's target the good stuff. And certainly there was very much top down. Right, this is the objective. This is what we want to try and hit. This is how we're going to do it. And being able to see what our competitors are doing. It's all very well and good. I mean, we can look back to previous seasons and you see Mercedes have sort of gone nowhere with their pit stops for a little while. Ferrari's been a bit hit and miss. It's great having one-off performances, but realistically, from a strategy point of view inside of a race, you need to be able to hit your consistency. You need to be able to hit set times so that strategically for the race, you're not going to hinder the car.
And obviously, to get to that level, it requires so much practice. Like, how many hours? Because it's not just you turn up to track and give it one go.
No, for sure. I mean, in the off season, you're looking at anywhere from. I mean, given you got to think about the amount of reps you can do, right? So if you think about it in like gym terms, right? Think of each repetition of a stop is what 2-3 seconds if everything's going well. You'll hit 10 reps or 10 pit stops in 30 seconds. Spread that out a little bit, give a bit of buffer in there. You're probably looking at like half hour by the time you do your warm up and do your activation stuff and do your kind of debriefs and things. You're looking like an hour every day for pretty much the whole of the pre-season, plus pre-season testing, plus filming days, plus when you get to the track every day you're trying to hit it. So you're looking at well over, a few years back we tried to hit the target of 1,000 stops in pre-season. So it kind of gives you an idea, like, volume's key because it gives you that awareness of the things that can go wrong. So if you think back to to Monaco, was it 2020 or 21, where basically the front wheel gun like completely ruined Bottas's nut, like completely destroyed it. Like if you've been in the situation where you've kind of you've seen something like this happen, you know how to counter it. Yeah, and so by getting that amount of volume and that amount of practice, it gives you that awareness, that knowledge bank to draw on of, this is one of those situations. Yeah,
yeah, and in terms of how they practice, is that literally there's a car back at the factory, they're just doing it over and over again, or is there different kind of setup really?
No. I mean, every team's different. I can only speak from what I know. There's whispers and rumours of what everyone else has got. But yeah, look, there's no substitute for a real car, because you've got to think about your space around the car, like where you can stand, where you can put your feet. And realistically, when you get to the track, you're doing it on a real car. So it's all very well and good having like a pit stop rig or like a corner that can come in on its own. But the reality is that when you're trying to coordinate 22, 23 people around a car, like you need to have everyone working together. Granted, you can work on specific things separately, which you can do, but you really want everyone being together and have that synergy across the whole car, really. And so, yeah, like certainly for when I was there, we had a pit stop car that would just kind of get pushed in, and the kind of thing you'd see at the track really is like no different, but it's at the factory. Exact same setup, same feel, so that it's like you're there, you're already in that situation.
So what's the training regime for someone, I don't know, say someone was taking off a wheel, like what kind of stuff are they doing, like in the gym, like you mentioned, and stuff like that?
Yeah. So certainly like there's role specific stuff. For the most part, it's more about like the rear in particular. Like your wheel off guys want to be solid, so they need to have good upper body strength, good lower body strength, core strength. So you'll be hitting things like your squats, your deadlifts, your bent over rows, all that kind of stuff. For your wheel on guys, you're thinking like single leg lunges. You're thinking about things like your bench presses, your pushes. You think about your rotational work, like your wood chops, reverse wood chops, all that kind of stuff. So it's very, very tailored to the role. as to what they're having to do. Like the gunner's on his knees the entire time. There's no sense in working. I mean, part of a bigger program, you'd want to have him do, you want him to do squats and everything else. But realistically, for what he needs, he doesn't need to be squatting heavy, whereas a wheel on guy does. You need big amounts of leg power. Your rear jack man, needs to be able to push tremendous amounts of weight. Like there's certain needs for different roles, but also for the individual. So, because you could have, we had a few years back, I had a guy, huge dude, really strong. Like there was no need for him really to be any stronger. Like he was strong enough. It's more about being able to maintain that with him, and working more specifically on just his speed a little bit. So it really depends on the person. It's very, very, it's that tried and tested saying in S&C, like, well, it depends on the person.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of that physical effort, is there a part of the pit stop that I know they're all obviously very tough, but is there a specific part you think that's definitely the hardest job in terms of physicalness of it?
Like the front jack's one of those ones where you have to have absolute balls of steel and nerves of steel, right? Like you've got a car coming at you at 80k an hour most of the time, and you're hoping to God that he stops. And our old friend Jack, man, he's funny. Like just very, very simple. Yeah, car goes up, car goes down. You have to kind of switch off from the fact that there's a car coming at you. But certainly, I think the most it really depends. The most physical job is probably the wheel-ons and the rear jack. One of the unsung heroes of the stop, though, I think really is the wheel off, because that can really derail everything. Obviously, the gunners are vital, and we know that good gunners can win or lose pit stops. But if your wheel off guy isn't on point, and if he's not firing all cylinders, pardon the pun, your gunner's not going to be able to perform right. Your wheel on guy's not going to be able to perform right. The car's going to become unstable. It's going to start rocking around all over the place. So it's one of those roles where everyone thinks, oh yeah, it's wheel off, it's fine. But actually, like from what I've learned in the thousands of hours of watching pit stops, is like the wheel off guy can really make or break your pit stop. And yeah, probably the most physically demanding is probably the rear wheel ons, just because of the size of the things. They're absolutely huge. So
you bring that up. Obviously, you were working with McLaren, starting at McLaren, when the tyres were a lot smaller, and then in 2022 they went up massively. Like, what was that to deal with as a change, really? So
it was interesting. So obviously, all the teams were able to sort of have a little look at them beforehand. You get a feel for them. And you look at them, and the first thing that strikes you is the fact that like they're absolutely huge. You're looking at this rear wheel, particularly the rears, and you're going, this thing's enormous. But then you very quickly realise, like, actually, it's not as bad as you first think. Like, yes, they're heavier, so they're about 25 kilos for a rear corner, versus about 18 kilos the year, like on the 13 inches. So the weight's obviously there, but biomechanically, it's actually not that bad, because the center point of the wheel is slightly higher. You're in a bit more of an ergonomic position, so it's a bit more user friendly. It's just a really big awkward thing, and like there was a lot of concern around the wheels, and obviously like everyone at the time was saying, oh no, that Red Bull pit stop will never be broken. That no one could go faster than 1.8 was it 1.82 seconds, and like it is doable, like, and although the wheels were bigger, they weren't crazy big. Like it just sort of changed around who you might have on a wheel on versus how you would have done before. And obviously the fronts are bigger as well, but they're not. It didn't seem quite so bad on the front. I think because the weight was no different to the rear, so everyone was like, well, okay, it's not that bad. But the rears were like quite daunting. Like, geez, these are big.
Yeah. And you mentioned there, like, do you think this 1.8 by McLaren, is that ever going to be beat, or is that just, is there a limit? You think they will?
No, 100%. Yeah. Like, I already know the guy. I like knowing the timing of the guys. Like the quickest corner can do it in 1.3 seconds.
Oh wow!
So like we're talking like it could be, it will be broken at some point. Whether see the challenge with the quick stop isn't to have one very, very fast corner. Right, you're always limited by your slowest corner. So you can have one corner that's like absolutely lightning and will hit 1.3s, 1.4s all day long, and then you have another corner that's hitting like a 3 second, and you know suddenly your top performers or your quickest guys are like being covered over. Like I'm under no illusions. Like my guys on a good day would break their own record 5 times in a session. And wow. that's not being arrogant or blowing smoke up them. That's just how good they are. Like and that's how quick you can get. Obviously, there's things that are designed to help slow you down. So, like the TDs around pit stops and the human input and all that kind of stuff. But it is still doable. Like it's still something we can achieve. Like that could be achieved. I'm hoping it does because the spectacular thing that's cool. It's great having a world record, but you also want to see it broken because you're like, wow, okay, how fast can it get?
You know? And in terms of speed, this is sort of what I ask you, because obviously, like sort of McLaren and Red Bull are sort of the two teams that are very quick at this. But if we looked back last year, a lot of Red Bulls were for Sergio Perez rather than Max. And I'm just thinking, does race situation play a part? Like, is there a risk reward be going quick versus making sure it goes well?
Yeah. Well, there's sort of 2 or 3 factors there, right? So you've got, like you said there, like Perez seemed to be quicker than Max. Just straight away, that kind of tells you one of the answers already, is that probably however Perez is entering into the box is more favourable to the pit crew than how Max is. Right now, if you took the race position, like obviously Max last year was basically racing on his own at the front of the field, so like fair enough. Like, but the reality is like the speed of entry and exit of the box and positioning has such a big impact on the pit crew that it's probably the case that Perez has a smoother entry and exit of the box and is slightly squarer in the box than Max. I don't know. I haven't looked at any of their overheads, but that's probably the reality of the situation. And certainly that's where the how can I say it? Like probably the stronger pit crews are ones that are able to handle those differences between the drivers more. And so there is going to be an impact on like race position. Like if you're racing for a win, you want to execute, and there is a risk of you're trying to chase speed rather than consistency. And this is where it kind of loops back to that primary thing we had of like being consistent. Like you're not going to win a race via a quick pit stop, but you're certainly going to lose a race from a slow one. And just having that as your kind of your benchmark, your baseline of like, okay, well, right, we need to keep it safe. We don't want to go and release the car and the wheel falls off, or Joe's gone and smashed his leg up. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just no good. But what you want is consistency, and then that in itself allows you to be quick on the track as well, because you're then able to get the driver out in clean air rather than it's like 2 seconds and you're suddenly behind someone in dirty air, and you're getting massive deg on the tyres, and you're in a world of hurt. So there's certainly a risk if you go if you're trying to push speed and then end up becoming slow. But then also there's the drivers themselves and their position in terms of how they stop in the box as well. That does have an impact.
So is that something that like your team will be aware of? Will they be like, okay, Lander's coming in, we know he likes to do this, whereas Oscar's coming in, he will tend to do this? Is that something they'll be locked into?
Yeah, like obviously the reality is that you can't really. There's so many variables, right? There's so many variables between the driver. Like it could be that like typically two of the worst pit lanes on the calendar are Monaco, obviously, and Netherlands, because it's so tight and small. And I remember the first year we went to Netherlands, it was like this big channel like down the pit lane. So the driver's basically coming into the box on like 3 wheels. Like, shit, I hope he stops. He's got one wheel in the air, he's coming in. So those things have an impact. So you control as much as you can, but then there'll be bits where you're like, okay, well, you've also just got to be able to adapt. Like, there's certain tolerances that you'd go, look, this is excessively far. Like if he's shot 2 meters forward of the box, well, it's quite obvious, mate, what's going on?
Yeah.
You need to stop in the box. But you can handle these little variances, and certainly like, I'm sure all the teams are watching where the driver's stopping in their stopping position, how much feedback they give to the drivers, and how much they're all doing. I couldn't say, but certainly like it is something that that from when I've spoken to other people, like, yeah, that is something that everyone's kind of on the same page with, of like, really, you want to be stopping where you need to stop.
Yeah. And during a race, like, I know obviously you get rush spin pit stops where you get sent out immediately, but usually, like, how much warning is a pit team going to get from whoever's making that call?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the team. I mean, it looks sometimes like, I think certainly the more disciplined teams, you can get away with being a little bit later with your calls, but there is a cut-off where you're like, if you've got the car in the pit lane and you're suddenly calling the pit crew out, like, it's going to have an impact. So that would differ for each team, because obviously their setup is slightly different, like how they stack the tyres, where they stack the tyres, how they're getting the tyres out to the pit lane. To different boxes, depending on which garage you're in. If you're in, if you're, I'm trying to think some of it, but essentially if the garage is like further away from the pit box, then it would normally be straight outside. If it's like a little ways up the road, you're going to want to adjust your call out time. But typically, I'd say most teams are probably getting about 20 odd seconds call out. So like, it's not a crazy long amount of time. But certainly it's long enough that you can get yourself in position, and you kind of want to be in position really with like a good few seconds to at least be able to see the car coming down the pit lane. If you're there and you're turning up with your tyre as it's coming to a stop, you haven't got time to mentally prepare. And certainly I think we've seen that in races beforehand. And don't be wrong, sometimes the situation changes. Like, if you've got intermittent conditions and you're going, you're not sure if you're going to be going to a slick or an inter, or from inter to a wet, and it's a short, sharp call. Like, it's going to happen. It's a sport, but typically you'd want to have, you don't be calling them out for an entire lap, clearly, because standing in the pit lane, start twiddling their thumbs. Oh, okay, it's going to turn up a minute. But you also don't want it to be, right, you've got to get out there now because he's here. Like it's hard to say for every team. That's probably where I'd go.
And how much bluffing is there? But I'm thinking in particular, I think Mercedes would want to do this, where they sort of stand out and they come back. Is that from your point of view? Is that someone telling you, right, can you go out, but we're not actually coming in, or is it just what happened there?
No, do you know what? So I get that some people would want to bluff, right? Because you'd want to try and get into box a bit earlier, because then it frees up, you clean it, all this kind of stuff. But thinking about the humans at the other end of it and what happens physiologically, right? So I'm going to bore you a little bit with this, but like, if you think about it, you think about adrenaline, right? So you're getting called out, right? Oscar's boxing this lap, and you're like, oh God, right, your heart rate starts going up, you're adrenaline, right, we're boxing. If you then find out it's a bluff, you're going to be a bit peeved. And also from my side, I'm like, right, now I've got to try and get this guy calm again, get him back in the zone, ready to go again. So, like, if you're going to bluff, it needs to be worth it, like really, really worth it. And I think you can, because the chances are you're probably going to hinder your actual pit stop. Like, if you're bluffing on lap 39, you're going to box on lap 42, like, it's probably going to hinder you a little bit. There's going to be a residual bit of like, because also the guys are like, really? Oh God, right, okay. So like, if you're going to do it, you do it properly. But it wasn't really a thing that you do. I know some teams do, and like, that's cool for them, but I'm not really into it, I don't think.
So what are you doing during a race? Obviously, I mean, at most it's going to be like 2 or 3 pit stops. Like, what are your role? What are you saying to the team while the drivers are out on track, like halfway through a stint?
So, I mean, a lot of it's down to managing people, right? So you're heading out. So you're checking everyone's okay. So you check and make sure they've got their fluids, they've got snacks if they need them. Yeah, no one's falling asleep because it's hot, or it's a good controversial comment. Some races are a little bit dull. Yeah. Some races are a little bit, processional. So, you're just checking in with everyone to make sure they're at the state you want. And when when you've got a bit of an idea, you can see how the race is unfolding, and you kind of get chatter. So I would often have more of the strategy going on in my ears more than the guys. The guys tend to have like very little, and I think that's pretty true for every team. Like, you just want them to have the the minimal information with the accurate information to make decisions. Whereas for me, I was always a bit curious, so I wanted to have a bit more going on. So you'd have a bit more of an idea of what was happening with the two cars, and just checking in with everyone, make sure they're okay, and then immediately after a stop, checking in with them again. Like, okay, right, did anything go? Did it go well? Did it not? Like, very, very simply, green light, red light. Okay, was it good? Perfect, happy days. Yeah, everyone, yep, spot on. Anything bad? Okay, let's understand it. Let's try and get information back into the team to understand what was going on, to make sure everyone's clear on what happened, why it's happened, if there's anything we need to mitigate for the next round of stops. But otherwise, you're generally just there to kind of keep an eye on everyone and just be that extra set of hands. Because particularly for most teams, obviously the chief mechanic's the one releasing the car, and the team manager, or in our case, the director of car and operations, is making the call from the pit wall. So they're all doing their thing. They've got other things they're doing. They're checking the kit, they're doing all this other stuff. So you're just an extra floater to kind of help choreograph what's going on. If anyone has an injury, you can time with a physio, or they have a problem, they cut themselves or something daft. Like, you can speak to the doc. Like, you can help be that coordinator of what's going on, and debriefing quickly if something's happened. I remember a couple of times where I've had to just be that person where you go over it, something's gone wrong, and one person or two people take it harder. You're there to pick them back up as well. Like, at the end of the day, these are dudes that have spent the entire week grafting on the car, building the thing, building all the garages, and they go and fluff it. Like, it's not their, you're a human being at the end of it, and Sky Sports are brilliant for this. They always pick the person that has the worst day, and they're like, oh look, like Beth, like with Bottas in Monaco, everyone's watching it for like a good 40, however long. So you just need to be there to kind of help pick people back up as well. So it's a very versatile role, but it's quite soft skills. It's not like you're doing really detailed technical breakdowns of everything right there and then. After the fact, like after the race, then you do all your detailed stuff.
Just imagine Bottas example. Imagine if you were, I don't know, if you were Mercedes or he was driving for McLaren. What do you say to those particular mechanics? Obviously, from the outset, it looked like it wasn't their fault, really. It's just one in a million fluke that kind of happened. Like, what are you saying to them, sort of picking back up?
Yeah, it's you got to draw a line under it. You can't let that. You can't let that stuff affect you. Like, you have to be able to cut it, learn what you can from it. Take the positives, take the learning from it. Like, every situation, and this is the same for any sport. It's something I did in my sporting career as well. Is like, you learn way more from a loss than you do from a win. Like, when you have a bad situation, you can learn from it and understand what happened. Okay, is there anything I could have done differently? What were the things that went wrong, and how could I fix them next time? And then you park it. Like, you cannot, because the problem is that when you've then got, it's the same crew for every stop, right? We know. So if I've messed up stop number 1, but it's likely to be a 3-stop race per car, like, I've still got 5 more stops I've got to do. Like, I can't let that affect me. I cannot, under any circumstances, let that bleed through, because then you get this snowball where the team loses confidence in the entire crew. You lose your own confidence. It just it snowballs quickly. So you have to be able to draw a line under it and help that person draw a line under it. Look, sometimes things go wrong. We just have to accept it. You can't be like, when you're trying to perform at your absolute best, sometimes you're going to fall short, and sometimes things are going to happen. That's life. Deal with it. You've got to draw a line under it and move on. And afterwards, we can feel bad about it. We can feel sorry for ourselves. But right now, we need to refocus and gather our shit together and go again. You know what I mean? It's that kind of talk you got to give.
And you mentioned high pressure situations. Obviously, the double stack probably the worst part for what's that like? Is that something you specifically train for?
So we used to do a lot of practicing of it, but the reality is that when a double stack's done correctly, when everyone knows going into a double shuffle that the chances are you're going to hinder the second car. Like, that's kind of an obvious thing, right? Because you've got the crew out, they're not quite they've already done the first one, and there's a chance it could go wrong, so it could impact the second one. It's hard. It's really hard to practice, but you would tend to try and practice at the end of live runs. So like during your FP1, 2, 3, you would try doing double shuffles at the end of it. Mm-hmm. You would try where possible to make sure you got a big enough gap between the two cars, to make sure you're not impacting each other too much. And yeah, so you'll throw in a couple, but the reality is a double shuffle compared to a standard stop, there's no difference. It's just it's just two people are carrying out wheels per corner versus one. Something that I've seen time and time again that can go wrong is you forget. You're so worried about the second car, you forget to really complete the first one. So you dump your wheel off, dumps the tire out the way, and he's like trying to go for the second tire before. So your wheel on guy's got the tire on. He's scrambling for the second tire before the first one's actually fully home. Mm-hmm. You get some sort of issue, and you're like, "Oh, all right, brilliant. Now I've got to go back to do that again." So like, when it's done correctly, I mean, like we've done a few absolute belters before now, and when it's done well, they look unreal. You just see like, bloody hell, you serviced it 2 cars within 5 seconds. It's insane. Mm-hmm. So yeah, like they're good. I think the main thing is, again, it's like composure and control. Like you've got to be able to settle your nerves in between and just relax with it. Like you know what to do. You're not doing anything different. You're just doing the same thing. Just focus, and keep present. So don't let your mind sort of wander off into the sort of never land. You've got to look, here we go. Focus, get it done, get it gone, get the next one done, get it gone.
Mm-hmm. And if we take a step back, sort of look at your McLaren time at a whole, really, because obviously you were there for quite a monumental time in history, really. We'll talk about that transition time in a bit. But speaking of drivers, I mean, I'm guessing when you started, was it Lewis and Jensen? I'm guessing were they the first two that you had? Sort of what were your experience with drivers in total? Have you got any good stories of?
So I met Lewis a few times at the factory, and I randomly ended up training him one day. He was like, he was doing a sim session or doing some sort of talk upstairs. He was doing something at the factory, and he was like, he came down and he was like, "Oh right, okay, yeah, I want to do some bench and stuff." And I was like, obviously everyone knows who Lewis Hamilton is. Even back then, before he became who he is now, you're like, "Oh my god, it's Lewis Hamilton." But just very, very cool, very chilled out guy. And yeah, so like he was only there for, it was 1, maybe 2 seasons. When did I start? 2011. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was maybe there. It was like a season and a half that I knew him, that he was driving the team. I met him a handful of times across that period. Jensen was definitely, he was a cool dude, man. Like just a really nice guy. Like just very much would learn something about you. And so, like, I mean, I was just some guy that worked in the gym, but he knew that I did kickboxing. Mm-hmm. And I remembered it, and just one of those people where you just thought, actually, yeah, do you know what? He cares. He knows something. He knows something. He didn't know the ins and outs of my life, but knew something. He was cool. Same as Sergio Perez, and it was quite a funny thing. So, like, he came down, and so my proper name Sergio, and I was like, oh, there's a second Sergio now in McLaren. Well, it's just me. And we had a little bit of fun with that, and we were doing his fitness testing and stuff. And Kevin Magnussen, like I've known him for years, and just really, really, really cool dude. And I remember I was actually there the day that he signed the contract to race, and like he sort of came down. It was like after everyone had finished. It was like a Friday night late shift I was doing or something like that. And he came down and he's like, they got this massive grin on his face. I said, "You all right? What's going on?" And he's like, nothing. Honestly, like grinning from cheek to cheek. I was like, "Is it happened?" He went, "Yeah." He said, "You can't sign." I was like, I won't. And I was like, I was so happy for him, because like, it's been his dream to be in F1 since he was a kid. And then like you meet him and you're like, wow, man, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. And to be able to see him achieve that. Same as like, so with Nick de Vries as well, when I knew him, as I said, when he was a kid, and we'd known each other for years, and he sort of went off, and I was doing a stint in Formula E for a bit. I was working with one of the teams over there. Whilst I was still at McLaren, and done some bits over there, and I saw him in the paddock, and we'd get chatting with him, and then we were in Japan. When was it? It was in Japan 2022, 21, 22, whatever, the season before. I saw him, I was like, oh, mate, I sort of can't wait to see you on the grid. Obviously, performance is a separate thing, but yeah, like, to be honest, there's been no, all the drivers, like Daniel was probably up there with like one of the nicest guys, and I really, really got on well with him. And all of his team, like Michael and Blake, like really top guys, and got a good future. Like got quite close to him, really, because we ended up doing a bit of work, like doing like treatments and stuff, and sports massage and stuff with him, and work with him a bit. Just an absolutely sound guy, like really down to earth, and like really odd because we've got quite a lot of similarities, like similar kind of taste in music and similar kind of like hobbies and stuff outside of F1, and yeah, very, very cool guy to get to know. Really like a properly nice person to get to know.
And did you find his mood stay exactly the same, even like on track? Because obviously he had a bit of a difficult time, but kind of was he still just as happy as ever?
Yeah, like obviously, all drivers are human beings, right? So they're always going to feel stuff, and obviously you're not going to be happy when you're not performing. But I think because of the team around him, was really able to. Okay, it's happened, right? Let's learn. And I never wasn't his race engineer. I mean, I couldn't tell you what his mood was like inside of meetings, but certainly like would outwardly project that. No, it's okay. We'll learn. We'll pick ourselves back up. We'll keep going, which I think you need as a driver, like in general, and any top level athlete. Like, you need to be able to just shut out some of the noise. Because at the end of the day, there's always going to be someone slating you for something that you've done. Like it's just the nature of the beast. It's not right, and I don't agree with it, but it's just part and parcel of being a top performer. Is people will try and snipe you, and being able to just shut it out and keep focused on the next thing, and that learning is the key bit, I think.
And what about the current crop? What about Lando and Oscar? Sort of how are they behind closed doors?
Yeah, sound like, I mean, Oscar's like he's very, very what I'd call like cerebral. Like he's very much a thinker. Like I haven't known him as long as like Lando or Carlos or Daniel or whatever, but like certainly an absolute killer behind the wheel. Let's be fair. Like he is mustard, but yeah, it's very much more of a thinker, and I think that's kind of what you need, certainly from, because F1's a bit of an odd sport. Like you're thinking outside the car as much as you are in the car. Like outside the car, you think, okay, how in this situation would I tweak the car? What feedback can I give to the engineers? Understanding what the engineers are saying and how that's going to affect the car. Like there's all these types of things going on, as well as going out and driving the thing. And Lando doesn't really, like, he's just a happy-go-lucky kind of guy, like inside and out. I tell you what you see on the TV. Like he's just very. I remember the first few seasons, like he would be doing the pack-ups and stuff with the team, and just very much one of the guys. Like always, the good things with both of them, they always like chat to their mechanics and chat to their team, their close team around them, which I think is really important. And certainly something I'd heard a lot about with Jensen was like, you get the team around you, you speak to them, you get them on board, so that if they do go and rip off all four corners in Belgium, they're going to stay up all night to put the thing back together. And they're going to do it for you because they believe in you, and you're not. They know that you're in it as well with them. And yeah, you need to have that kind of side as well. So that's really the nicer side of those kind of guys, I think.
And what are you up to? So obviously, I think if I'm right, you left McLaren last year. So what are you working on now?
Yeah, so like now, very much taking a lot of the learning I've done within my career overall, and applying that to other fields as performance consultant. So working with teams, companies. Okay, how can we helping them to unpack their performance. Okay, well, what are the things they're struggling with? How can we adapt them and help them to achieve more, essentially? So yeah, like setting up shop for myself. I just need good new challenge, new direction, which is fun.
Mm-hmm. And the last question I ask you is, obviously, a lot of people want to get into F1. Sort of what is, I know it's not a normal route like into anyone for really to get into the job. Sort of, what's your advice to anyone who wants to get a job like yours, maybe, or just generally into the sport?
Yeah, I mean, depending on what it is you're doing, like, there's so many jobs behind the scenes that no one knows about. Mm-hmm. Like, this thing is like, when we say it's a circus, like it really is an absolute. So there's so many different things, like everything down to the obvious stuff at your HRs and team travel. Like team travel, they're the unsung heroes. So they're the ones that get you in and home again. Like all the logistics, all the purchasing. So like, I think it's really like having your skill, whatever it might be. It could be a mechanic, could be a strength conditioning coach, could be HR, whatever. Obviously you need to have that first, and then really the best way I've seen and from other people coming into the industry is starting off with lower category series. So you're thinking of like your Formula 3s, Formula 2s, that kind of series, but also outside of that as well. So thinking like Formula E, Extreme E, those types of series, and start working with them. So if you think about like human performance as a strength coach, working with karters is a great way of understanding and learning. Single seaters, same thing. Or it could be sports cars. Like a good friend of mine, he's working with a driver and in sports cars. That's his way in, and that's awesome. Doing really well. His driver's doing really well as well, and that builds up that knowledge and experience of working with an athlete in this kind of sport, to then be able to take those steps up. And you think about most of the guys on the grid now all started in karting, and they were pretty much in karting when I first started out my career. So there's nothing to say that you're not going to start working with someone and they could be the next whoever. And there's garages and teams all over the shop. Like they're everywhere. So certainly, trying to find a way in that way, and building up your knowledge and experience, and opportunities come up. A lot of it is waiting for the right opportunity to come along and being able to like snap it up when you're there. But you certainly put yourself in a position where you've got good experience, good knowledge, and then being able to apply it is the big thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's it. That's the weird. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Well, thanks for having a chat. It was a fascinating chat about everything pit stops, really.
No, more than welcome. It's great to chat to you.
My thanks go to Sergio for what I'm sure you will agree was a hugely interesting chat about everything that goes into an F1 pit stop. We will have F1 cars back on the track for the first time in months this week, so make sure you click subscribe so you don't miss our next episode, which will be a massive recap about everything we saw from the McLaren team. And in the meantime, thanks again for listening, and enjoy that McLaren car back out on track.